Hi, everyone. Before we start our series of conversations about transgenderism with Dr. Mehrdad, Alipour, and myself, we like to introduce ourselves and give a bit of background on who we are and why we decided to do this podcast. Firstly, my name is Asha Ali, and I'm a master's student at the Institute of Arabic and Islamic Studies at the University of Exeter, reading gender studies in the Islamic world. I first met Mehrdad at the Institute while he was doing his PhD. We'll talk a bit more about that soon. And I asked him about Islamic legal advice on marriage. Perhaps this can also be a topic for another time. Then a few months later, he became my teacher during my undergrad studies. He taught me a module on gender and sexuality in the Middle East. During my time on the course, I quickly came to realize that I knew practically nothing about gender and sexuality in Islam, and Mehrdad's classes were not only eye-opening, but also hugely liberating. As the course progressed and our relationship developed, I learned about the different debates within the Islamic scholarship and the importance of grounding my knowledge in Islamic tradition. My particular interests are gender, race, and sexuality in Islam, with specific focus on the experiences of Black Muslim women and Black gender minority people within the Muslim community, and how our Blackness shapes our relationship with the wider Ummah. My work looks at anti-Blackness within the Muslim community and whether or not Black Muslims, specifically Black Muslim women and gender minority individuals, are included or feel included in the Ummah. And now, let me introduce my co-host, Dr. Mehrdad Alipour. Mehrdad is a scholar of Islamic studies. His research mainly focuses on Islamic law, legal theory, and Iranian Muslim intellectual traditions. He is particularly interested in the transformation of Islamic legal and ethical traditions concerning sexuality, sex, and gender diversity in the pre-modern and modern era. Currently, Mehrdad is working on a project titled Beyond Binaries, Intersex in Islamic Legal Tradition at the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at the University of Utrecht. This study will examine intersex identity as a third sex and or gender in the Islamic legal context between the 16th and early 20th century. Having graduated from the seminary of Qom in 2017 till 2020, Mehrdad pursued his doctoral research in Arabic and Islamic studies at the University of Exeter. His PhD dissertation titled Negotiating Homosexuality in Contemporary Shia Islam is the first academic exploration of discursive spaces for debating homosexuality in modern Shia Islam, based on legal hermeneutical analysis of Islamic law. Mehrdad.
Thank you for your kind and generous words about me and my work. It was short, but complete.
Thank you. So what is your goal in this journey?
Wow, that is a very good question, but it's huge. But briefly speaking, drawing from my experiences, I genuinely seek to find a common academic language and method for discussing gender, sex, and sexuality in Islam. For what? To foster future dialogue between and across Muslims and non-Muslims beyond East-West divides. Furthermore, I aim to enhance understanding of the relationship between Islamic sources and classical and contemporary interpretations, among Muslim communities living in the West by holding dialogues between reformists and traditional scholars, or, as we know, ulama of Islam.
Now, let's start with a bit of background on the topics we will discuss in these podcasts. Firstly, gender and sexual diversity, such as homosexuality, transgenderism, and intersex, are increasingly debated, tolerated, or even accepted in non-Muslim Western societies. However, many Muslims, either in the West or in Muslim majority societies, are reluctant to discuss or tolerate such topics. As an expert in this field, why do you think this is, Mehrdad?
You correctly pressed on a very sensitive point. In fact, today, both in Muslim majority and in Western Muslim minority context, traditional scholars of Islam and grassroots communities alike often oppose sexuality and gender diversity. And generally speaking, the arguments are fueled by patriarchal interpretations of the received tradition. However, despite such a patriarchal understanding of Islam, contemporary grassroots level activists and a few Muslim feminists or reformist scholars advocate a more tolerant attitude and speak of Islam's potential tolerance of sexual and gender diversity.
Can you give us an example of this, please?
Sure. In the case of Sunni Islam, for example, scholars have presented several alternative interpretations from Islamic legal and theological perspectives for sexual and gender diversities. However, this is true that Shia scholars have often preferred not to engage in these debates. Nevertheless, I must mention that the topic has already been discussed from the cultural and historical aspects in some Shia majority societies such as Iran too.
So why is that? And I'm asking because we now know that the discussions on gender and sexuality in Imami discourse was initiated through Ayatollah Khomeini's fatwa in the 60s and 1980s, legalizing gender-confirming surgery for transgender and intersex people. So how can this silence conveniently be justified?
This is very true. I believe that this silence cannot be justified. So we need to break up this silence. What are we going to do now in this debate? In fact, one way to stop such silence.
Okay. I think we have reached a great point. So let us speak a bit about what exactly we're aiming to do in this series.
My expectation would be to enrich the existing scholarship on the legal and ethical aspects of sexuality and gender diversity in Islam. We would offer a public scholarly assessment of the Islamic views, demarcating the space between the two poles of prohibition and acceptance of diversity and diversities in sexualities and genders. One important point which I need to add here is that our present debates were undertaken on the premise that Islamic legal and ethical traditions on the issues of sexuality and genders are in fact more flexible than one might expect. So to address this essential point, our debates, I believe, should be built around a hermeneutical, constructive question. A question like this: what are the discursive spaces on gender, sex, and sexuality in contemporary reflections within Islamic legal and ethical scholarship?
Thank you very much, Mehrdad. If anyone is interested, sources for this podcast could be found on the links below. And I look forward to our next conversation. Until then.